At least some Chicago Bears starters will play against the Cleveland Browns on Saturday, but not Caleb Williams. Should the starting quarterback get any reps this preseason? We'll discuss Ben Johnson's plan and what he wants to see on today's Locked On Bears podcast.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. On the show today, we're taking a look at the Bears' plan for the preseason with their starters in particular. Not going to see too many of them against the Cleveland Browns on Saturday, but Ben Johnson certainly not ruling out the possibility of all of them playing later on in the preseason. Still to be determined week by week. But we'll explore what the plan is for Caleb Williams and whether or not he should see the field at all during the preseason. We'll check in on some of the other starters to figure out who could really use some preseason playing time and who really doesn't need to be out there. And then we'll explore some of the top players to watch on Saturday that aren't starters and will definitely be getting some playing time out there that are worth tuning in for an otherwise relatively meaningless preseason game. Because without Caleb Williams out there, it's not going to be the same level of excitement, right? We're not going to be able to get a glimpse of just how far along this Bears offense is coming in year two under Ben Johnson. And to be fair, even if Caleb Williams was out there, it's not a full glimpse, a full look at how far along the offense has come along because, you know, in the preseason, they're not running their full playbook. They're not trying to show anything to opposing defensive coordinators that they could then use in the regular season. But still, we would be looking for things like timing with the receivers and the pre-snap operation, getting everybody lined up and avoiding false starts and those kind of things that you look for just in terms of kind of a smooth handling of everyone being on the same page of the offense. But we will not get that at all against the Cleveland Browns. And Ben Johnson is leaving open more or less like all possibilities here. Like at his press conference on Thursday, he said like he doesn't necessarily need to see Caleb Williams take preseason game snaps. Now, that's not him saying Caleb Williams for sure will not play preseason game snaps. Still hasn't made a final decision on that either way. But I think from Ben Johnson's perspective, it's not as though the throws and snaps that Caleb Williams would play in a preseason game, they don't weigh drastically more than throws and snaps he would get at practice. They may weigh slightly more if it's against a real opponent and it's in Soldier Field or I guess, you know, an away stadium, but like it's not necessarily like going to be twice as valuable as the practice snaps. So Ben Johnson is looking at this from a perspective of, okay, we've got essentially like 4 weeks from today is like regular season-ish week one to get ready for that first opponent. And he needs to feel very confident that Caleb Williams and the entire Bears offense is ready for week one. But there's a world where they're perfectly ready for week one without playing in the preseason at all, just from having good practices and stacking good practice reps. There will be joint practices coming up next week with the Cincinnati Bengals and then into the following week as well with the Tennessee Titans, I believe. And so those will also be like higher intensity, higher leverage type of practice reps that are closer to a game than a regular practice type of value and weighting. And so I think Ben Johnson looks at this and says, listen, if Caleb Williams is remaining sharp and on top of everything and not making mistakes and not repeating mistakes and, you know, taking all the growth they want to see, then maybe they won't feel a very strong need to get Caleb Williams out there. I mean, you look back to last preseason and Caleb Williams also didn't play in that first preseason game, did play in the next two preseason games, got a couple of drives in the second and the third preseason game. And so based on that, I'm not surprised that he's not playing in the first preseason game this year. If like last year was when he probably most needed preseason snaps because he's still learning the offense and getting on the same page with everybody. And they still thought, doesn't really need all three preseason games. So of course he was never going to play in all three preseason games. And if he sat out the first one last year, he's almost certainly going to sit out the first one this year unless Ben Johnson was drastically changing his approach to the preseason. So then it becomes a question of, will he play at all in the second and or third preseason games? And I remember even last year, we were tearing our hair out a little bit, wondering why he was out there in the third preseason game. Like, that last preseason game is typically the one around the NFL that no starters play. They treat it like we used to treat the fourth preseason game, where there was no starters. It was all backups and just guys fighting for their roster spot. But last year, Ben Johnson opted to keep Caleb Williams out there, and we were all just a little bit nervous about him playing those snaps. And how is the benefit of a few extra snaps worth the risk of potential injury or whatever bad thing could come out of that preseason game? And ultimately, it was fine. Everything was fine, and it didn't cause any problems, and it was extra reps for Caleb Williams. But it shows that Ben Johnson's not afraid to like throw even his starting quarterback out there in those games if he feels like he needs it. And something that has been kind of stuck in my brain on this, that Ben Johnson talked about, I think it was at least a week ago now, kind of early on in training camp, he was asked, do you think your starters are going to play in the preseason at all? And he said, of course, we're still working through that and figuring that out. But he had said something along the lines of that, like, he does think it is valuable to have the starters go through the pregame just routine, right? Of you show up to game day, however many hours you would on a normal game day. You do your pregame warmups. You're out on the field going through warmups as though you're going to play on game day, and you go through the kickoff and you run on the field and you do that first snap. Like, just so, like, he specifically said, so that you don't get to week one, and week one is the first time you're doing all those things in a full year, right? That, like, not that they would not know what to do or that they need to practice those things, but it's just sort of like a mental block of like, okay, when you get to week one, none of it feels like the first time that you're doing anything this season. Like, you've literally already even just rehearsed it essentially in a preseason game. So I suspect, like, if I could bet on FanDuel or trade on KALSHI and predict, will Caleb Williams see any preseason snaps this season, I would take yes on that. I suspect Ben Johnson will want Caleb Williams and the healthy starters to just go through that operation, right? Just go through the pregame routine, line up on that first snap, take a snap. Maybe you just play one drive. If it's 3 and out, maybe it's 2 drives, but you just 5 to 10 plays, whatever it ends up being, and get them out of there just to kind of just knock the rust off and just kind of run through that operation of like being under center at Soldier Field, on the field. Like, yes, he knows how to do all those things, but just sort of that mental block of like, okay, now you literally have already done it before you get to week one. Like, you just did it a couple weeks ago, and nothing is new, nothing is unexpected. Everything is kind of like this version of you has gone through all this process now. And so I expect at this point, until we hear otherwise from Ben Johnson, that we will see Caleb at least a little bit at some point. I would assume probably the second preseason game against the Cincinnati Bengals. I guess the next 2 are both on the road, so this is their only Soldier Field opportunity. But still, I think Ben Johnson puts some value on that, enough to say, hey, it's worth it. And realistically, 5 or 10 snaps in a preseason game is not exposing Caleb Williams to a large amount of risk, especially if you're just kind of cautious with your play calling. He could hand the ball off 5 times and then go sit, or you could throw a screen pass, or like a 3-step drop, a slant. Like, you're not calling anything that asks Caleb Williams to hold on to the ball super long or puts him in harm's way. You can kind of call some safe plays just so he's actually taking some snaps in a real game from Garrett Bradbury, throwing a real pass to Khalif Raymond in a real game for the first time. Like, those kind of things, just to kind of check some boxes. So there's no thinking about, oh shoot, I haven't done this since January, let me remember how to do all this stuff. Like, it just kind of becomes second nature at that point. So I think they're going to be more cautious with Caleb this year than last year, but that doesn't mean he's going to necessarily sit out the whole preseason. But we are going to see at least some starters this Saturday against the Cleveland Browns. We don't know exactly who, but I think we can make some pretty educated guesses on who really needs the playing time and who really doesn't. So we'll explore who should be out there and who shouldn't next on Locked On Bears. Support for today's episode comes from Odoo. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. Because you got one app for accounting, another app for inventory, another one for sales, and somehow none of them really talk to each other. But that's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform to help your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing software. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working together toward the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it is in business. Great organizations win because operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/locked-on. That's odoo.com/locked-on. Ben Johnson said, many Bears starters will not play against the Browns. First he said a handful, then he said many of those guys won't be out there. We do not know what number of players that will be. And he said, I'm not going to go through, is he in, is he out kind of thing. Like that's not worth his time. But I think we can rule out some pretty obvious suspects of who's not going to play and rule in some pretty obvious suspects of who will play. And then there's a handful of players in between that are a little bit more of a toss-up, but maybe it's not as many players as question marks as you might think. Like, for example, there is no world where Joe Thuney plays any preseason snaps in this game, and I don't believe he played any preseason snaps last year either. And so we will not see Joe Thuney this preseason. Period. Like there's just no reason for Joe Thuney to be out there as a 33-year-old 8-time Pro Bowler, however many Pro Bowls. It feels like he's made every Pro Bowl in his entire career. I don't know the exact number. I'm just spitballing 8. Like there's no reason for Joe Thuney to be out there at this stage of his career. I don't think there's any reason for Jalen Johnson to be out there. He's practicing great at practice. He's healthy. He's a really good player. Like, sure, he's not an old man at all. I mean, he's still only 27, believe it or not. But like the kind of high-end starters on your team that you already know exactly what they are and what they aren't, don't need to be out there. Montez Sweat does not need to be out there in this preseason game whatsoever. Looking back at last year, he did play a little bit in the second and third preseason games. So we could still see him at some point. But like in this game, absolutely not. When you're sitting your starters, he's in that conversation. Grady Jarrett is in that conversation. Despite us needing to see more from Grady Jarrett, you're just not going to put a 33-year-old out in a preseason game if they're not fighting for their 53-man roster spot. Like obviously we know Luther Burden is injured, so we're not going to see him out there. We know that guys like Kyler Gordon and Kobe Bryant and those kind of injured starters are not going to be out there. Braxton Jones is close to coming back from his tweaked knee, whatever the situation is there, but he will not play in this game. Ben Johnson revealed that the starting left tackle will be Karan Amagaji, and he is going to split it with Jedrick Wills, and they're going to basically alternate by quarter and try and get them an equal number of snaps. So in theory, Amagaji plays the first quarter, Wills plays the second quarter, Amagaji gets the third, and Wills gets the fourth. And they may bend that if like one quarter has a lot of offensive snaps and then one quarter doesn't, they could kind of extend that and bleed over a little bit. But like those will be your starting left tackles for this game, but not really your actual starter. I'm not really expecting to see any of the starting offensive line elsewhere. No Thuney, no Bradbury, no Jonah Jackson, no Darnell Wright. Tyson Bagent starting the game at quarterback. I think you'll have your second team offensive line in there with Karan Amagaji at left tackle. You won't see Luther Burden because he's hurt. I assume you won't see Rome Odunze at that point, and probably not Khalif Raymond, given that he too is a 32-year-old veteran, just turned 32 actually a couple days ago. It looks like plenty of time for young receivers to go out there. I don't imagine you'll see Colston Loveland or Cole Kmet or DeAndre Swift. So like you're really starting to chop down like most of this starting lineup. I think when I look at other starters that I expect to play, I think one of the big areas I look at is guys who are starters right now because of injuries in the secondary, that might not have otherwise been starters, would have been backups, but are now thrust into the starting lineup because starters are hurt. And so therefore they are technically your starters, but they're also technically your first backups. And so they're starting this game because if everyone was healthy, they would have normally been starting this game. But because your starters aren't healthy, they're your new starters. And they could probably use the playing time to give them extra opportunity. Like I think we will see rookie cornerback Malik Muhammad as a 4th round pick. He's your starting nickel cornerback right now as a starter because Kyler Gordon's been hurt, Cam Lewis has been hurt, Jalen Jones has been hurt. Like he's been your first team nickel cornerback at practice. He will certainly start this game and play a lot of this game out there. I don't know that we're going to see Xavier Woods, the veteran safety that they brought in to replace Kobe Bryant. He's 31. He's just got here, so he's got a lot of learning to do. But Ben Johnson kind of indicated that this is a smart veteran player who will be fine if he doesn't get much playing time in the preseason. So I don't think we will see him. But I do think I would expect to see rookie safety Dylan Thieneman out there. I think any healthy rookie is going to play in this game, even though Dylan Thieneman is a quote-unquote starter. Right? I mean, I don't want him to throw quotes. He's a starter. He's your starting safety. But I think he's going to play with a bunch of backups in the secondary in this game because he could use the reps and could build some of that cohesion with somebody like Malik Muhammad, who's probably going to be playing with him in the secondary. And we'll see how healthy the rest of the cornerback group is there. But like, I suspect, we'll see Dylan Thieneman, and if Cam Lewis can play, great. If not, it'll probably be, Skylar Thomas or Anthony Johnson. And then you'll see Malik Muhammad and Josh Blackwell, and Terrell Smith and Jalen Jones have both been banged up. So I'm not sure we're going to see either of them. Like they're a little thin at cornerback in terms of healthy players. It might be Dante Manning as one of the outside cornerbacks in there because Malik Muhammad will play the slot in the nickel and probably play the outside in some other base defense situation. So I think we're going to see kind of a weird mix of players on the secondary, from a true starter in Dylan Thieneman to a potential like third string safety with him, and then somewhere in between at cornerback. The one who's right in the middle ground for me that I'm like, I couldn't actually, there's two guys that are right in the coin toss. Do they play or do they not play? Because they're starters, but they're starters who I think should play based on what we've seen from them. But obviously the coaching staff has seen a lot more from them and has a more informed opinion on that. I think Tyreek Stevenson should play because it feels to me like Tyreek Stevenson is absolutely still competing for his starting job. Even though a lot of his competition is injured, Malik Muhammad is at least in that competition, and his injured competition of like Terrell Smith and Jalen Jones and whoever will be back this preseason at some point by all accounts. And so he does have to keep earning that, even if his direct competition isn't necessarily going to play. I would like to see Tyreek Stevenson out there a little bit. He's been generating some real turnovers at practice and showing some of that playmaking ability and having a better camp and kind of growing in his role in a way that the coaching staff is definitely encouraged by. I still need to see more, right? It's about consistency. Yes, we've always known he's capable of making some interceptions, making some big plays, but he also has some lapses and gives up some big plays. So like, I want to see more snaps, build up that body of work of like, he's not just been consistent for one or two practices, but now it's consistent for hundreds of snaps across multiple practices, across preseason games, to give you that broader like foundation of, oh yeah, he seems to have worked through some of the focus and timing issues that he struggled with earlier in his career. So I'd like to see him keep earning that starting opportunity. And then I wonder also about Dayo Odeyingbo on the defensive line, someone who's kind of competing for his starting job with Austin Booker. It's not really like it's not a black and white who's the starter, who's the backup kind of thing, because Odeyingbo is going to kick inside and play a lot of defensive tackle, and Austin Booker will come in on a lot of pass rushing downs. Like it's not so much like 1 and 2. It's kind of 1A and 1B there. It's a blurry line there, but Dayo Odeyingbo hasn't played a competitive football snap since October last year. Coming off of that Achilles, like I would like to see him out there just knocking some of the rust off and kind of re-earning and rebuilding some of that confidence of just being on the field against a real opponent, putting weight on that heel and trying to show us some progress and some development from him. Like he's the other guy that's a starter that I really feel like I would like to see out there. But he and Stevenson are just kind of kind of in the middle for me. Like, I don't think we'll see Devin Bush or TJ Edwards. I don't think we're going to see Jervon Dexter probably at this point in the process. Obviously not Sweat, but a couple of those other guys that are teetering right on the line, I would like to see get those extra reps. But there's a bunch of backups and key rotational players for the present and the future that are going to have an impact on this Bears team that will play in this preseason game. And I want to go through the guys we should be most excited to watch and watch closely next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a home run today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with Daily Dingers. It's free to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a homer in their game. And if you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is just another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep, and now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. So are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a home run. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. Just because the starters aren't playing in the preseason, or most of the starters aren't playing in this preseason game against the Browns, doesn't mean there won't be exciting football on your screen and important players to watch out on the field. I think back to two of them last year that were breakout stars in the preseason that, 3-4 months later turned out to be important key contributors late in the regular season. You may recall last preseason, and I know it's foggy. I had kind of had to refresh my memory a little bit on how it went for the Bears. But last preseason, the breakout star of the Chicago Bears defense was Austin Booker. He had 4 or 5 sacks across 2 preseason games because he got hurt, I think, in the second preseason game after getting to the quarterback twice, and then ended up starting the season on injured reserve and didn't come off until midseason and didn't really emerge until late season as he still was recovering from that injury. But the preseason breakout of Austin Booker was foreshadowing the late season breakout of Austin Booker. And that doesn't mean every player who plays well in the preseason is going to then turn around and be a key player down the stretch. But we saw how much Booker was able to come off the bench and make some of those key sacks against the Green Bay Packers and other games late in the year. And we saw that with how well he played, especially in that first preseason game, and then even a little bit more in that second preseason game. So obviously, Austin Booker is high on my list of players I want to see. I want to see him not only repeat what he did last preseason, but pick back up where he was last year at the end of the year, and feel like he's someone who, can maintain what he was doing and then also even take that to a higher level as he's continuing to kind of add more to his game. And they focused on technique and trying to get the best out of this defensive line, playing and being more attacking as opposed to more reacting is what the Bears were having their defensive linemen do last season. So I assume Montez Sweat will not play, and then Booker will be one of your starting defensive ends in this game. And whether it's Dio Odengbo on the other side or Daniel Hardy or Jamri Chroma, I mean, with Shamar Turner still on PUP and with Sweat likely not to play, like, you're getting down there with only 4 or 5 defensive ends you're going to use in this game. So I imagine there'll be plenty of playing time for Booker throughout this game, and maybe a more incentive to use Dio Odengbo and not just give him the game off there as well. But the offensive version of Austin Booker last year in the preseason, of course, was wide receiver Ja'Day Walker, who was kind of that breakout star, if you will, that ended up earning his way onto the 53-man roster. In the preseason, he had 8 catches for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then, of course, comes back, kind of rides the bench in the roster for a while, but then, late in the season has a big touchdown against the Packers in week 16, and then scores again against the Lions in week 18. Not that he was like a game changer for the Bears, but a player who was great in the preseason and then found a way to make an impact late in the season when his number had to be called. I also want to see then, can Walker pick that up and kind of dominate again in the preseason? Like, I want to see Booker and Walker in particular, but all these guys we're going to talk about look like a regular season player in the preseason. Right? A lot of the guys that they're going to be playing against are backups and roster cuts, players who are not starting caliber NFL players, players who might not ever play a regular season snap in the NFL. Like Walker and Booker have played regular season snaps, important regular season snaps. And the players who have played important regular season snaps should dominate the players on the other team who will never play important regular season snaps. And I want to see that in this game from those two guys in particular. A couple of others that I'd like to see dominate and show that they're a step above the competition that they're playing, that I'm really excited to watch. 6th-round defensive tackle Jordan Vandenberg has been one of the breakout players at training camp. Went from being a third-string defensive tackle playing with the third team, did really well there, started getting second-team reps with some of the veteran free agents the Bears had signed this offseason, did really well there, and now has been rotating in with the first team at defensive tackle, taking snaps away from Grady Jarrett and Gervon Dexter at Bears practice. I don't think we're going to see Grady Jarrett or Gervon Dexter in this preseason game. And so I'm curious, does Jordan Vandenberg start? Is it going to be like him and Neville Gallimore? And like that kind of affirms a depth chart placing for those two guys as your top two backups? Or, do the veterans kind of get a nod there, like Kentavious Street and James Lynch? I'm curious about James Lynch too, because the Bears signed him as a defensive tackle, but they've been using him at defensive end in practice sometimes, kind of having him play both. So I'm curious if the Bears are thin at defensive end with Sweat and Turner at a minimum sitting out, could you also then see Lynch play some more defensive end to get more defensive tackle playing time for Vandenberg and Street and Gallimore and the undrafted rookie Jaden Loving? That's going to be something to watch. But if Vandenberg is playing against the first team at practice, then I want to see him look like a first team player against backups on the Cleveland Browns there. One other defensive player we'll throw in before we switch over to the offense. Linebacker Ruben Hippolyte, 4th-round pick last year. Kind of a disappointment when he was on the field last year, but that's another spot where you've got injuries and veterans that are going to sit, and so there's going to be a ton of playing time for Ruben Hippolyte to show us why the Bears drafted him in the 4th round, show us the kind of development he's been able to make now in his first full offseason with the franchise. We're not expected to see Devin Bush or TJ Edwards. DeMarco Jackson has been injured, and I don't expect he will play. And so your starting linebackers may be Ruben Hippolyte and Jack Sanborn. Sanborn's definitely the next man up on the depth chart. But Noah Sewell is still recovering from his Achilles injury. Keyshawn Elliott is still on the physically unable to perform list, your rookie 5th-round pick. So you are going to be a little thin at linebacker. I mean, you still got Nephi Sewell and John Radigan, Tony Fields, like a few guys that aren't really household names that could still be important players in this game. But I want to see Ruben Hippolyte look better than everyone else on the depth chart. Maybe not Jack Sanborn, but everyone else behind them on the depth chart. Like he should, as a 4th-round pick, like show that the Bears made the right investment in you by standing out a little bit in this first preseason game. A couple other quick guys on offense. I don't know that we're going to see Xavier Thomas, the rookie 3rd-round pick, because he's been kind of banged up and dealing with injuries, but certainly he would be someone I really want to watch. 3rd-round pick Sam Roush, the tight end out of Stanford, presumably will be the starting tight end in this game. I think we kind of know he's a really good blocker, but it'd be cool to see him get involved in the passing game, get a better sense of, his ability to get open and make guys miss at the NFL level, where they're a little bigger, faster, stronger than they were when he was playing at Stanford, and kind of see if can he be more than just a number 3 who blocks this year, or is there some potential for him to do a little bit of damage in those 13 personnel packages? While we're on the draft pick conversation, I'd like to see where rookie center Logan Jones is in his development. They haven't given him any first team reps in Garrett Bradbury's place. Bradbury is the starter. Jones is the backup. That's fine. I'm not overly concerned by that, but you would like a 2nd-round pick, even in this first preseason game as a rookie, to look like a better player than the undrafted free agents rushing against him. And I guess, I don't know the Browns' backup defensive tackles. Maybe they have some really good players there. Mike Hill and Sam Kamara, former Chicago Bear, might be in there, but like they even have former Bear Travis Bell. Look at that. It'll be a whole reunion. But like he, as a 2nd-round pick and the first center taken in the draft, he should be really solid in there. Not to say that he's going to make any mistakes or not on the, could be not on the same page with a teammate because you're still trying to learn that. But like one-on-one blocking, I want to see my 2nd-round pick at center really, really dominate there. And then at running back, one name to keep an eye on is someone we haven't talked much about this offseason, Salvon Ahmed It was a running back the Bears signed in May, kind of under the radar late in the process. He's really pushing Roschon Johnson for that number 3 running back spot and has been kind of a quiet standout at training camp. So running back number 36, Salvon Ahmed, I think it's like Ahmed. I imagine we're going to see a lot of carries from him. He's got some connections to the Bears running backs coach from their time together in Miami. And also UDFA Coleman Bennett is one I've been trying to keep an eye on, but I think Ahmed is kind of the real contender here to unseat Roschon Johnson as that number 3 back. So in this running game, I want to see who can take advantage of the free lanes they're getting from their offensive linemen. So see that there's plenty to watch against the Cleveland Browns, even without the Bears starters out there. And we will break it all down for you on Monday's Locked On Bears podcast. The Locked On Bears YouTube channel will be live right after the game for the Bears squad show, and that audio will get posted in your audio feeds as well immediately afterwards. So we'll have immediate post-game coverage, then a full Locked On Bears podcast episode coming for you on Monday. That's why you have to hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Come on back on Monday. Make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.